Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I want to talk about, as the title is very clear, the book that broke me. And I'll explain what I mean by the book that broke me. This is not a negative review of the book. I'm not sure what it is. It's just a book that broke me. So the book in question is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. And what I mean by the book that broke me, or what I mean by this book broke me, is that I couldn't read anything else while I was reading this book. This is just such a confusing, complex book that I tried. I did finish a couple of other books while I was reading this one, and I just, I'm not sure that I can give proper reviews of the other books because this book was sucking a lot of my brain and emotional energy. It was just sucking a lot of energy. And so reading something else while also reading this was just very difficult. And I kind of resented that because I've become very good at reading multiple books at once, even in the same format. I'm able to do that. And this book made it harder for me to be able to do that, or made it hard. And I just, that was a really weird, odd feeling for me. The other reason why this book broke me is because it was so confusing, and I was spending so much time trying to figure this book out that I just felt broken. At the same time, though, I was also finishing my semester. I'm now done with the spring semester, so there's a clarity that I now feel in my brain. Some of it is because I'm done teaching, but I think a lot of it is also because I'm done reading this book. I'm done reading Midnight's Children, and yeah, it's just it's a really frustrating book, and I think it merited its own review because I know that I'm not going to be the only one who feels this way. I looked at reviews of it on Goodreads, and I think people who understand this book might be lying a little bit. Obviously not everyone, but I think some people might be. So let's start digging into it. Let's start with the premise. So it's actually really hard to summarize this book because it's a three-part book, and the narrator begins by telling us that this is the story of his birth. He's going to tell us his story. But all of part one, we don't really get that. Instead, what the narrator is giving us is the story of people around his life, his grandfather and grandmother, and how that marriage came to be, and then a little bit of the beginnings of that marriage. And then he'll pick up talking about a particular person in his life, and then give us, a chapter, maybe two chapters on this person, and then kind of drop the person altogether. And so that's another thing that is really difficult about this book, is that there's not always complete arcs to the people that we are meeting and to the stories that are being told. And that can be really frustrating as a reader. The narration is a key element of this book. That is clearly where a lot of techniques are being used. In some places, it's really obvious. Right away, one of the things that you'll notice is that the narrator cuts from telling what happened in the past to what is happening in his life in the present. There is a woman, Padma, in his life who keeps interrupting the narration, and he's telling us what she's saying and what her feedback is to what he's writing. That was annoying at first, and then I just really connected with the character because that voice is used to do a lot of the prodding, moving forward, and I was like, yes, can we just move on? So that was interesting. There's also clearly chapters in which he's using particular techniques. In one chapter, there's a lot of repetition of certain words, some alliteration, mostly just repetition of certain phrases, and it can go on for pages and then abruptly kind of stop, or sometimes it's not abruptly, sometimes there's a narration shift and a thematic shift that happens that correlates with the technique shifting. um, but that's not always discernible. Like sometimes I picked up on that, other times I was not picking up on that at all, and then it just reads as confusing. There's also times in which the story is being told in first person and then it shifts to third person. And in fact, there's a few chapters in which there are sentences that start in third person and end in first person. And it's that is clearly purposeful. Like it's a technique that Rushdie is using, but it's confusing. It's very confusing. And so that was part of the element that was just like that I'm saying just broke me. As a reader, I felt kind of broken trying to follow, because it's not one technique, it's multiple techniques, it's often changing, the narrative is often changing, and so figuring it out was just work. It was a lot of work, and I don't mind putting work into my reading. This just felt like too much work, frankly. Yes. I also felt like if you're going to pick up this book, you need at least some basic understanding of either Indian history or Indian culture. There's a lot of references being made, especially, well, no, throughout the whole story, that I knew he was referencing something in Indian culture, but I was not fully understanding the reference. And that is okay. Like, that's okay with me when I pick up a book that is clearly focused on a culture other than a culture that I'm very familiar with, and I know that I'm not going to understand all of the cultural references, and that's perfectly fine. But it helps if you know at least some, right? Like, one of the things that I felt really lucky was that I had just read the Ramayana with my world history class. It's an ancient Indian epic, and it's tied to Hinduism, although there's also a Buddhist version, and there's multiple versions of the Ramayana, but it's very clearly and heavily referenced in Midnight's Children, and that helped me at times. I was like, oh, okay, if this person is like Rama and this person's like the demon, like that gave me an entryway into certain elements of the story that was really helpful, because even if I wasn't understanding what was happening in the story, I could at least, like, I knew what had happened in the Ramayana, so that gave me something to cling to. In the third part of the book, it's also very heavily South Asian history. And that actually, the chapters that are heavily history based, those were the best ones for me, the ones that were not hard to understand. So the reference, or one of the key elements in this story, is that he is born at the same time that the British have left India, and India becomes a nation state, and the partition also takes place, and so the South Asian continent is broken up into the new nation state of India and the nation state of Pakistan. And so that you have a lot of that history, and what happens after the partition are really reflected in the story, and that part, like, that almost made me feel like I was understanding what was happening. I say almost, because I think part of what Rushdie's doing is telling the story of India through the story of this main character, and that element was a key to unlocking some of the secrets of this book, but not all of them. Like, that was not enough for me to feel like I actually understood the book, because that theme is not always there. His life and the life of the people around him are not always matching up to the political narrative of South Asia. So I felt really dumb. I felt really dumb for parts of this book, and that's okay. Like, I'm okay with a book making me feel dumb, but it was so consistently making me feel dumb that it added to me feeling like, oh my God, I'm dumb and I'm broken and I don't know how to read clearly. And that's not the case, because immediately afterward, like, I've been loving everything I've been reading since finishing Midnight's Children. Um, One of the things that my friend, so a buddy read this book, and I honestly only kept reading it because she wanted to keep reading it. She, however, I think she agreed with a lot of, like, she would agree with a lot of what I'm saying now, except she really had a good outlook, a good approach to it. She is thinking of this book as a kind of reference book. Like, not a book that you're going to want to reread even, or a book that is like, oh my god, I loved it. No, but a reference book for what it does in terms of technique and in terms of what journey it takes you on. And that, when she said that to me, I thought, yeah, this is a really unique book. I have never read a book like this. You know, there are books that use some literary techniques and that are visible and like cool. I read books that are really confusing, and but this just like merged so much that it's really rather unique in the books that I've read. On the other hand, I'm never picking up another book by Rushdie. I'm just not. Like, he has taken me on a journey, and I did not know what to expect when I picked up this book. I am glad I finished it, but I am gonna say that if pick up at your own risk. I'm not telling you to pick up this book at all, because the kind of reading experience that I had was not pleasurable. It was not fun to read at all. So I'm not going to wish that on anybody. But if you've read it, or if you plan on reading it, I would highly suggest buddy reading it, having somebody to bounce off of ideas off of, somebody to help you when you're getting lost, or at least reinforce the idea that, yeah, this is confusing and they're lost too. Because that would just be my recommendation. There are some really, really fascinating themes in the book. The way that the narrator describes the women in his life is really fascinating. The women are complex, kind of really interesting creatures. The men are less so. The men tend to be more, or maybe I just did not connect to a lot of those male characters. I found them often to be terrible people, and some of the women would do bad things, but they were not terrible people. There's an element of kind of magic in the book, and it gives certain parts of the book a very psychedelic feeling. Like, my friend and I were trying to pinpoint what that feeling was, and the only word that seemed to even get remotely to what the feeling is in those chapters is kind of psychedelic. And I didn't like that. But I'm sure some people would find it very interesting. I did not like it. I did not appreciate some of what Rushdie was doing there. So overall, this is like, I can see why it won awards, but also, like, what the hell? Like, it's strange. It's a strange, funny little book. Well, not little. It's not a little book. It's actually quite thick. By the time I had the hardest time with the first, like, 30% of the book. That was the hardest to get through. I really wanted to DNF it. Once I got to 50%, I had felt like I had spent so much time and energy trying to figure this book out that I just needed to finish it. And then somewhere around like the 60% through the book, my friend and I both independently had decided that we just needed to rush through the finish of this book. And that's what I did. I picked it up and I binge read that ending. Which probably means I missed a few things, but at that point I was totally okay with that. I did not need to understand every single element in that book, because I don't think, like, I think it's the confusing elements are done on purpose. I think Rushdie is trying to confuse you. And that's what makes it really hard to, like, review. Like, I'm not giving this a star rating on Goodreads. I don't know how I could possibly give it a star rating, because typically I base my star ratings or just my reviews overall on emotionally what this book made me feel, and intellectually what a book made me think, like that intellectual journey. And I can appreciate that there were very intentional things being done in this book, a lot of which I did not fully understand. But where does that leave me in terms of rating? Because it left me very frustrated and feeling very dumb, and that. But that was the goal at times, right? And like that's another element that I take into consideration in my reviews, is what is the book trying to do, and was it successful in achieving that goal? And I think this book was trying to confuse me. I think it was trying to make me feel dumb at times. And so what do I do with that? Just warn the rest of you about it. That's it. That's why I'm doing this video, because I know there's got to be other people that felt the same way I did. And also just FYI, if you're going to pick up this book, I think you need to know what you're getting into, which I did not. I quickly found out though. So if you've read this book, if you have some thoughts, if you want to add something to what I've been saying, if you want to touch on themes that I haven't touched on, please go ahead and leave a comment down below. I am looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts on Midnight's Children and Salman Rushdie's writing. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!